Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is Tuesday, January 11th, just prior to leaving for Washington, D.C. for the Imaging USA. I'm excited to go there. And today we have all the way from Hawaii, Mr. Dwight Okumoto. And he's going to teach us all kinds of good stuff, and he's going to smile the whole time while he's doing it. And hopefully his pet bird will join us again.
I think he went wandering off to go to sleep. So he's wandering someplace. So fine.
Oh, you heard you were teaching?
Yes. Well, shall I kind of jump in right now, or?
Sure, why not? We need to make you a co-host, don't we?
No, let's see.
Oh, no,
I got it.
Good. All right.
I got it. Okay, I'm just gonna. Okay, yeah, everything's good. I'm gonna, let's see, let me minimize my screen so I don't see faces. Okay, I'm gonna buzz through this really quick. And today I'm gonna try and talk about why I use the RAW file, or else Photoshop Camera Raw, or else I guess some of you use Bridge, or let's see, what else is available? Camera Raw, Bridge. Well, anyway, I try to use. What's that?
Lightroom.
Lightroom. I forgot about that. Thank you. Well, you can tell I don't use Lightroom because I forgot about it. Well, anyway, why I use Bridge, or else I use the RAW file. I try to do a lot of my processing before I take my final image into Photoshop. I want to do as much as possible in the RAW file itself, so then that information is still kept there. Once I take it into Photoshop, I may destroy or damage or make changes that I can't recover backwards unless I make multiple layers just to save layers. Okay, so I'm going to go through this real quickly. I'm going to show you. This is a school auditorium, and I'm going to photograph this marching band. Okay, so this is a marching band in the auditorium, and what I do is I set up. Always get a good exposure before you start. I set up lights. So I try to set up like eight strobe lights. What I do is I set them up. These are not expensive lights, things that you can find at the trade show. And what I'm doing is I'm putting a gel over these lights here just to balance out this warmness of the existing stage lighting. So I put a gel over my strobe lights, which is a little warmer, just to help out my color corrections when I try to make the adjustments of color balance mixed with the tungsten or quartz lights that are coming down from the actual stage itself. So that's why I'm putting these gels over my reflectors. Sometimes I don't do it. If I have enough power coming out of my strobes, I don't put the gels on because I don't depend on any lighting coming from the actual stage itself. So, okay, so I'm putting the gels on. As you can see, I'm putting it on these high 11-foot poles. I have these are not the balcony area, but then up in the actual auditorium, I'm just setting up the lights. I'm getting everything ready. And then before I start, I will give instructions, yelling over to the kids. This is a high school orchestra and band. And this is how it kind of looks where I have all my strobe lights set up. Okay, so now, as you know, it's always good, get a good exposure. So what I'm trying to do is make sure that what I'm seeing on my screen, back screen, my my hand meter, what I have is accurate on good exposure. Now, this is the raw picture that I took, I start with. And as you can see over here, I'm at, well, this one here is at f14, 1/50th of a second. At my ISO is at 500. And this was taken with a Mark IV, so this kind of recent. And so this was taken with a 2470 Canon lens, f2.8. So this lens works best for me with this lighting situation. So this is what I start with. And this is the target that I'm going for. By the time I start going into the corrections, I would try to correct, try to get the white balance, dark areas correct for perspectives and distortions, lens distortion. So I would go into the Camera Raw or Bridge that I'm using and then try to do these adjustments within this working software here. Now, let's see. Let's see if I can open this up here. Okay, so now this is going into my adjustments. As you can see, I would try to go through let's see, I go through my exposure adjustments. Okay, I'm just watching the delay in the adjustments and my white balance, and I'll go through everything. I would correct the color temperature, exposure. I will go straight down the line, work on some shadows just to bring in some details. I mean, all of this information is there in your actual raw file. It's just that you have to take advantage and pull it out. Well, okay, one thing I would do, first of all, make sure that I'm going into the lens corrections. As you can see on the top right corner here, I'm going into lens corrections, and what I will do is remove chromatic aberration. Always do that. Remove that, and the software is really smart to pick that up. And also I would enable profile lens corrections. Okay, so the software is really smart. If you have a up-to-date camera with the updates on the software, it will read that this is a Canon camera, Canon lens. It will actually read a 2470, the 2.8, and it will ask for the profile, and it will have all of these things taken care of by the software, and that really helps. If I turn off the lens corrections here, you should see there's just a slight change of distortion. There's a slight exposure change on the lens for this particular lens. Each lens has its own characteristics, so take advantage of the software. It'll do it for you. There we go. Click it back on. So those are the things that I kind of let the software take care of. And also too, at the same time, I am making sure that the lines, the auditorium itself, the background are plumb and straight. The background, so the front line, the front flank of the students is their level. I want to make sure of that. So I make that correction. Okay, so now I will go back, and then I will start working on lighting and darkening certain areas. Okay, I'm going to go back, cancel this out, and just quickly. This is the raw. This is the actual raw file, the same file. And then first thing, I'll just make sure everything should be zeroed out. Okay, now let's see here. So I put on chromatic aberration, lens profile corrections, and it reads which lens I have. And then I'll start to go back. Of course, on the side of my working screen, I do have a guide print. It's a guide print. It's an image of a person with neutral skin tones, and it has the gray chart on grayscale chart and the color balance and all these other things. I use it as a guide print within my presentation on my screen as I'm doing corrections, so I can see the color balance, exposure, everything else. Now, keep in mind, we're in Hawaii. There are a lot of Asians, so our skin tones are much on the warmer yellow side. So then I do have a guide image where my guide image is of an Asian person, and but he's very neutral in color that I find, and I use that a lot because if you notice here, the band. This high school band are all Asians, all slant eyes, okay? And we have some Polynesians with some darker skin. So we have a little unique type of situation as compared to, I guess, subjects coming from the mainland states, the lower 48s. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is, this is a raw image out of my camera. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just tweak for exposure, and then I'm going to look at certain areas where the pants are kind of blown out because these are white pants. I'm going to pull it back just a little, just to get some little detail. And of course, these girls down here, let's get in a little closer. They have a lot of black within themselves, so that I'm going to black color. So I'm going to pull up some shadows just to bring some details. The reason another reason too, again, I try to do this within the Camera Raw is that information is stored on a sidecar or an XMP file, which is a very small file that tags along with your raw file. If you're using a Nikon, Canon, Sony, this XMP or sidecar file stores all of this information that we are that I'm messing around with just to get a final image. So it is really important that this sidecar XMP file is paired up with your raw file, because that is like, it's like the DNA. It's like the DNA in your body. Everything is just so unique and it holds a lot of information. This is getting the little in more detail, but little things I would kind of tweak. I know my camera, I have problems with blue. My Canon, I noticed that my blues are slightly off, but I don't see much blue in this overall presentation here, so that I won't mess with it too much. But anyway, I would like go through like the highlights here, take advantage of bringing in detail, little things like this. And okay, let's say I'm satisfied with that, okay, and I take care of that, and then I end up with this image here. And then now, a lot of you know, at the bottom of the right, you have this little you click on that and you have the before and after. Okay, so this is on the left side is my original raw, and on the right side, I have my correction. As you can see, the main thing that I'm looking right now is I'm hoping that the perspectives or else the lens distortions are kind of corrected, because this final use for the school would be a long horizontal presentation. So this is what their target is, what they're going to go for. Okay, so that's what is really good to see the before and after with this software process. Okay, so let's say this is what I want, and that's what I'm going to save. And and so this is what I do come up with, and supposedly if everything works out well, this is the target that I'm going for. And by the time I do the layout with the text, the text with the school at the bottom, this is what they wanted. So this is the PDF file. That's not a PDF, PSD file, Photoshop document, and it is a big file. Okay, so it comes up, and then you can see the many layers that I have it in. This is what I started with, and of course, in the Photoshop, I will do some of the burning of the edges, just to vignette, a darker vignette, so it is much more presentable as compared to just coming straight out of the camera. This is not out of the camera, but after adjustments. So this is the final product that the school is looking for. Okay, so now this is easy to do because I was in control of my lighting. This is what I wanted. I had control with the light source. I had everything in control. But then this COVID thing came up, and the school, we're supposed to photograph 3 more orchestras, okay, at the same school. This is the same auditorium. It was a nightmare. The reason was I could not put up any lights. Okay, I could not put any lights. This is where I put the lights with nobody in the audience. First of all, you worry about liability insurance because the lights may fall, and you don't want that to happen. And I know this sounds really unbelievable, but there was a time when we did this picture with the marching band, we had an earthquake. And the earthquake was about 200 miles away, but then it did shake. But it was at a good point where none of our equipment was all the way up yet. Everything was down at eye level. So, I mean, you think about it, and it did happen. And it is hard to believe, but it did happen. And all the years that I've been doing that, it did happen. Okay, so now we couldn't put lights up because there are parents present. There's an audience going on, and this is where I set up my camera. And to make it more complicated, I was not the head photographer. I mean, I was there just as a guest, just to watch and enjoy the entertainment of the performance, the concert. There was a photographer that they hired, they had as a friend, and he's way up here this is where I set up. This is where my tripod is. And this is where I do all the photography for the big group. And this is the guy that they had. And he is on the highest roll with a couple of really big bogans, 30-35s and a 30-50 bogan, if you remember those. He was there, but he showed his inexperience because he was not perfectly plumb or perfectly aligned, because the seat position that I placed my camera is exactly the center point from the right and the left side of the auditorium. Okay, so he's going to have perspective problems, distortion, and he was taking the pictures without flash. We had no equipment. Well, anyway, that wasn't my assignment, so I didn't say anything to him. We just had a conversation, and that was kind of it. And this is what we had to photograph. Okay, so within the live audience, people, the families were there. They had to come in 3 groups, the families. This kind of strange. The families came and left. Then we photographed the actual band or orchestra, when you can see the parents down here they're all there with their cell phone cameras. Now, as I sat there and I looked at this, where I have no control of lights, I'm looking at this and analyzing. The band instructor is in a dark shadow. He's in shadow. The far right side of the stage, they have no light on them. And the students, the percussion way in the back, they are completely, well, not completely, but they're in a dark area. So that was a nightmare. So what I had to do after I kind of messed with my raw files, and this is what I came up. Okay, this is the before, and this is what I came up with. So what I did was got more lighting on the band instructor. Okay, let me go up a little more. This is 100%. Let it res up a little. And so what I had to do was, it's going to res up a little more. System running a little slow, but I was able to bring in some detail within this area here. Let me go backwards. There we go. So I got some exposure here on the right side. As I go across, this is the band instructor here. I got that. So everybody else, by using the software, only thing I couldn't do, I had to swap some heads on the final image because there are a couple of blinks. You may, as another thing I like to joke about, you may look at these students, a lot of them look like they're blinking, but no, their eyes are slanted, so that's why they look like they're blinking. So that's a family issue thing they got to take care of. So this is what I did. Okay, I'm watching the time. This is what I did. So this is the exact raw file that I had to work with. Okay, so then let's see, I start with that. Okay, let me start this up. Okay, here we go. Okay, raw file here. So first thing I did was make sure, turn off chromatic aberration, enable lens correction. I'm using the same camera gear that I've always used. And as you notice, I am not, my horizon is off a little, but I'll tweak that a little later. But first of all, I'm looking at this, I said, holy smokes, exposure. And as I said, the right side of the stage is completely black. So what I'm gonna do is I just kind of tweaked it open. Okay, color balance to me, I think it's a little on the warm side because these are all quartz and tungsten lights, more quartz. They're not up to date with LED, or I did not see any of that type of different lighting equipment in the auditorium. Whenever I'm at the auditorium, I check the lighting. So I'm getting more exposure. And then as you see in front here, there's no detail. It's not important to have the people, but I just want to make sure that the woodwinds, their instruments get some nice color. So I'm starting to bring that in. Okay. Let me pull back. There we go. So this area here is still dark. And let me tweak this a little more. Okay, getting more exposure. I mean, more better exposure on the skin tones on these girls and guys in the back here. I'm watching one monitor. I'm going back and forth. Let me see. Sorry. Okay, I'm just going to pull it back a little more. My monitor was on the darker side. Someplace around there. Okay, so let's work on that. And so now let's see what I use. Okay, we know we have the white balance that we can correct, a lot of different ways to adjust color and contrast. And I just want to work on this a little. I am just going to push a little saturation because I just know how my camera is a little lacking on saturation with this type of lighting setup. Okay, now let's work in closer. What are we going to do in this area over here? So that's where I would go up and I would use this tool up over here. This is the Radial Tool. I am using an earlier version of Bridge and Photoshop. So this is not the latest version of 2022. So I'm using this earlier version. So now with this tool here, make sure I reset this to 0. Okay, everything on the right side is all set to 0. And then I'm just going to create a selected area here and kind of tweak it. Then I'm going to go up to exposure and I'm going to kind of lighten it a little more. I'm lightening and try to use a good speed, because when you move too slow, you can't see the gradation or the changes, the level of changes. So move it quickly. If you bypass it, retract a little. So let's start around there. And what I'm going to do is exposure came out much better than I expected. And let's get in closer. We're going to get some problems. As you can see, there is noise starting to form in the low density areas. So go down to the noise reduction on the right side and just kind of slide it and watch some of the changes. And reduce, please, reduce, please. No, let's go the other way. Noise reduction going up. There we go. I was going the wrong way. Okay, so just to give you an idea, just get rid of that noise reduction. I mean, the noise, because in the low density areas, the dark areas, you will pick up noise. Okay, so now that is getting better. In this area here, generally it's okay. So let's say, okay, this girl here is still on the darker side. So I will create a new selection and just kind of carry it over just on her. Okay, snow. So now, because that was my previous setting, that's much too bright on her, just on exposure, I'm going to pull her back just a little and get her into that point there. And always watch for your blacks, the quality of your blacks. So I'm going to pull back a little more. I want to make sure we get some nice blacks in there and then just kick up some whiteness into her face there. Okay, I'm going to kind of amend things really quick here. One more time, I'm just going to do this on this guy here. And there you go, just to bring him out just a little. And of course, detail is really bad. Let's get a little closer. As you can see, he's a little out of, not as sharp as possible. So, possibly you can push up some texture or clarity. You can mess around with that and see how it works to your, if it helps out. Okay, so now I'm going to pull back a little. And within this area here, so this is the before and after. Let's see. There we go. Okay, let's see if I can go to horizontal, top and bottom. Here we go. So in this area here, this is the original raw file, and this is the adjustments that we did on this image here. So you can see the before and after. So those are some of the advantages that you can that you should take in using the Lightroom, Bridge, Raw. Here we go. Let me just go to before and after and top and bottom. Okay. Okay, there you go. As you can see down here, I was able to recover some of that information. Well, let's hide the overlay. So that there is information coming back here. The information is there. It is always there in your raw file. It's just that you got to know how to pull it in, pull it out, how to use it, make adjustments. Okay, let me move on to another topic. Okay, so that was my biggest problem, and this was the end product. This was the end product of the for the school, what they needed. And it worked out. Things that I couldn't do, which I wish I was in charge is, of course, is this shadow area here on this guy. I would have told him to move his base, the neck, a little more so we wouldn't have that shadow. But I wasn't in charge of that photo shoot, so I kept my mouth quiet. I let the other guy behind me do everything, and it's pretty obvious he's not a photographer. So, but he's a nice guy. Okay, so now that is with one situation how to use the raw file. Now this one here, this was on New Year's Day. We had a storm. Our storm is basically rain and flooding as compared to snow and ice. So this is at one of our local parks right next to the ocean, and it flooded. We had a lot of rain. So I ran down just to capture this image here. What happened is this flooding is not a pond or a lake. This was just flooding on a baseball field. So I saw that. This is my actual exposure. As you can see, my exposure was f11, 1/30th of a second. It was on a tripod. My ISO was at 200. And what other information I have? That's about it. And this is actually the actual file that came out of the camera. I was happy because I knew I could pull out information to get to this final image here. Okay, so by knowing what my software can do, I said, this is what I'm going to do. This is great. This is my exposure. I'll work on this one here. I'll just start it up. I looked at this. Okay, first thing again, turn all of this on. There's a way you can actually have it, your profile in your software, it'll automatically do that. So now I looked at this. I said, okay, it's a little underexposed. I'm also exposing for the highlights with the sun going down. That was my main exposure because I knew I could pull out some detail within the low density areas. So I saw that. I said, okay, now shadows, pull the shadows out. Okay, great. I'm getting there. That's what I wanted. Now I look over here and Sherry Hammond is going to go, hey, this is too bright. So I'm thinking like a Sherry. Okay, I'm going to bring it down a little, tweak that a little. But of course, it affects, this is a global, well, not global, but the highlight area, it affected some of the areas on my right side of the image. Okay, so anyway, I try to get it there in general. And then just push it up a little more. I know I could get a little more detail, and then say, okay, I want a little more exposure because I think I can. Keep in mind, make mistakes because you're still working in a raw file and you can go back and make corrections. I'm just going to kick up some saturation just a little and bring up a little vibrance, just to get the warmness and the blues to come out a little more. I said, okay, I'm getting there, but it's not perfect. What shall I do? Okay, let's go into the hue, saturation, and luminance. Okay, hue and saturation. Okay, once again, I know that my blues are normally kind of messy with my Canon, so I kind of tweak it to a point where, okay, I think that's how it should be. It's just a very slight adjustment. Now, I want to kind of fake it and make the sky more vibrant. So I'm just going to play with the orange colors. I'm just tweaking it. I'm going to adjust it quickly so you can see the changes. So I'm going to mess with this. Non-photographers wouldn't know. They'll think it's really cool. But you and I know that what things start to look fake. And then let's start with that. And then say, okay, I'm going up to luminance. I just want to make that a little more dramatic. There we go. I want to push it a little more, but not to the point that is really bad. Kick up the blue a little. And then I'm going to get more saturation in the blue just to get the sky coming out. Okay, someplace like that. I'm just messing around. Okay, that was more saturation, and then there's luminance there, and then there is purple. There is purple within the sky there, as you can see. Okay, so I'm just kind of messing around with that, and just to get to this point here. So from this original file on the left, this is my original. I kind of knew already what I can do with the software and come up with something like this, which would be my target, what I'm going for. And I thought, hey, this is not bad. It kind of worked out. If I spent more time on it, well, I'll spend more time. I'll make it really quick one more time because this area here is too bright. Sherry Hammond is still telling me, she's texting me right now, your left sky is too bright. She just texted me that. So what I'm going to do is I created this, what do we call this here? It is called the Radial Filter. And I'm going to just default everything back to 0. because that was from my previous setting. It has memory on it. And I'm just going to kind of bring down some of the highlights a little, just see what happens. And well, just make it a little more yellow or something, or more believable. And then so I can balance out the left side just to make it a little more dramatic. And I also can do it on the right side, where I can just do the opposite, where I can make this side much brighter.
Can I make a comment real quick, Dwight?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
If you guys notice, his feather down at the bottom of the settings down there is
Right.
set to 81. So you don't
81.
see that dramatic stark between the dark and the light when he does this.
Okay. Oh, great. Let me do that. Okay. Right. Correct. I should have done this, but the problem is you do it too often. It's just like parking a car. You forget how you park a car. And so that's right. Without the feathering, that's the hard edge that you would normally see. So the feathering, yes, that is really important, just to have that there. So good point. Thanks for bringing that up. That's worth $2.98 of knowledge. Okay, so anyway, that's what I did. And once again, going back to before and after. So just remember now, you look at your file. It is great. Your file is great. And just understand the capabilities of what you can do with the software to take advantage of that. Okay, I'm going to cancel that out. Okay, I'm watching the time. And let's see. Here's one that I thought was, this is in British Columbia. This is in Victoria, British Columbia. And I saw this, and I saw the contrails. Okay, those that are aviators, you see that. You know that's a contrail, vapor trail from a jet plane. And then I saw this, oh God, what do you call this? The halo, the rainbow from the sun. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Okay, let's move on. I saw this going on, and I said, okay, my exposure was to get a good sky, and I'm hoping to get density back within the totem pole itself. Okay, so then I looked at that. Once again, okay, those are already on. I don't know what camera I was using. Okay, so now exposure, I said, I'm gonna kick it up just a little, because I'm trying to get detail back in the low density areas. And then I'm looking at that, the sky. I said, well, okay, I'll go back on the sky, kick it back a little more to get some detail, get to see the rainbow. And then now the shadows. Okay, I'm gonna work on the shadows and pull that out. And I said, okay, I see what's going on. And then I said, well, let's go a little more exposure here, all these little things. And well, right now my vibrance is pretty high. I'm going to kick it back a little. Okay, so this is just basic. And so I'm going to, let me just see if I can do any more else. This is one neat one that was kind of nice that they put in, was dehaze. Dehaze kind of almost likes increase some of the contrast, and it does kick up a little saturation with the dehaze adjustment. So that kind of helps and makes it, wow, that's kind of neat. Okay, so I remember seeing this back in the 70s when we did a lot of smoking. They're like, whoa, check this halo. I think Dennis would remember those days in the 70s, 60s. Okay, so you got that. Now I'm thinking, I still want to get more detail within this totem pole. Let's see. I'm going to just jump to this other tool over here, the Radial Tool. I'm just using this Radial. You could use a Radial Tool or else the adjustment brush, but I'm just going to use a Radial Tool. And then just going to pull it out. And as you can see, I had a previous setting already had adjusted here on the right side. I'm just going to default it back to 0. And then my feather, once again, I'm going to feather it up a little more. Okay, so now, first of all, I'm going to lighten that totem pole. Going to lighten it up a little. Okay, lighten it up. And because this is in the shadow side, you know that there is a lot of blue. So I said, I want to warm it up a little more because we're on the shadow side. So I'm just warming up, just get a little more warm wood tones. And then you can mess around with some other areas here. Of course, my selection area is a little on the coarse side, meaning I should take more time in adjusting to clean it up. And then I could, let's see, do more adjustments by messing around and push up some saturation here. There we go. Okay, so that's just a start there. And quickly going back, I am going to go to Hue, Saturation, and Luminance one more time, and going to take advantage of using some of, exaggerate or push up some of the warmness in the orange. The greens, I want to make the grass a little greener, so I'm going to tweak the green a little. Maybe that's a little too much, starting to look like a golf course again. And some of the blues, I'll leave it there. And as a luminance now, just to pull back some of that brightness, pull it back. So these are some of the ways that I kind of visualize the image that that I'm looking at. And I try to say, hey, this is what I can do with this image here. Even though my initial exposure is a piece of junk, this is what I can do. And keep in mind now, this is still in RAW. I didn't go into Photoshop yet. So just imagine if you were to go into Photoshop, you know, get rid of these people here. Well, in this actual software, you can use some of the tools to get rid of people down here by, what is this, a spot removal? Is this a spot removal here? White balance here, color sampling. Here we go, sorry, spot removal. Just by using a spot removal, I'll just go over this guy over here, or else these bunch of people here. And I think it might be smart enough, it just might pick a bad spot. That's not a good spot. Okay, I'm just guessing, and hopefully zap. Okay, there we go. Hopefully that might be good enough for a non-photographer not to know that that's so fake. But anyway, that's what I got, just to show you by take advantage of using using the software and understanding what the limits are, so you can you can go out there and not erase or delete your files just because you think it looks bad. You know, it is there. There's a lot of information there that you can use, and you know, just learn your software. And I think that'll be a big advantage for everybody. Okay, I'm stuck it to the time, and hope that's close enough. So anybody has any questions that yeah, questions out there, yeah, I'll be glad not to answer.
Anybody have any questions you want to ask? That was a quick down and dirty camera
It
raw.
is. Yeah, it's,
Wow.
well, I'm just hoping that everybody would take advantage of realizing that your files got so much information. It is there. It is, and one thing about it, by keeping it in RAW, it's not destroyed. You don't lose it. But once you put it into a TIFF Photoshop document, and when you start making changes, the pixels are altered, and you will lose some information, especially when you start going to JPEG compression. Don't use JPEG until your final image, final use.
Yeah, you can bring back the darks really easy. If you overexpose too much, you're not going to be able to bring back the whites. So be careful of that.
Sure.
Good. Thanks, Dwight. We appreciate
it. Thank you.
Let me crank off the recording.